There's a story about me that everybody knows, but that I've never really properly told on this YouTube channel. And it reflects the fact that incongruously, I actually don't like talking about myself. Um, there's this famous story of how the government authorities in Laos threatened to kill me, threatened to torture me, threatened to have me disappear. The threats from this government official included such details of the fact that my parents would never be able to recover my corpse. I'd never be able to have a proper Jewish funeral. It's an especially hilarious detail because it showed the particular Communist Party official who was making these threats toward me. To some extent, she knew who she was dealing with, but to some extent, she didn't. Like, on paper, I'm Jewish, so she must have thought, "Oh, this is a good way to threaten and intimidate this guy." Oh no! Oh no! My parents will never be able to have a Jewish funeral for me. And I laughed in her face when she was making the threats too. By the way, I laughed more then than I'm laughing now. It was hilarious in many ways. Um, but there were many ways in which I felt real compassion and pity for the woman who was threatening to have me tortured and imprisoned and murdered and so on. You know, she was a career communist power monger, right? And like many of those people, her husband was also a senior apparatchik in the Communist Party of Laos, this third world communist dictatorship. And she insisted several times that I can't complain that what she's doing to me is extraordinary or unethical because she said all other countries do it also. Um, Now, I knew her quite well. Um, it's not worth digressing into how exactly I knew this communist apparatchik and her life story. Um, I knew because she told me. There's no other source than her. But we'd had several very long, in-depth conversations before this. And one of the reasons she spoke English so well was that she had experience living in Western European countries and visiting United States of America and spending time there. She had lived for quite a long time in Sweden, and the Swedish government who set up this junket, they did not attempt to teach her Swedish or get her to speak Swedish. They said, "Okay, we'll do the whole thing in English." So her ability to speak English improved a great deal during her time in Sweden. I think it was a couple of years. It was a couple of years she'd lived in Sweden. And I remember I said to her, seriously, but kind of compassionately, I really felt kind of pity for her. It's like, do you actually believe that during the time you lived in Sweden, the government of Sweden did this to even one person? Like what you're doing right now to me, you know? And she didn't even admit, she kind of boasted about all the people. They'd basically done stereotypical Stalinist things to, on her watch in the Communist Party, abductions and interrogations and making people disappear, and ghost houses and secret prisons with no trials, and as she says, making bodies disappear with no funerals and all this stuff. She was really in threatening me. She was really offering a kind of indictment of her own political party and government in passing. It wasn't the purpose of this harangue she was giving me, and went on for hours. But in interrogating me, she was revealing the depth of the evil of her own government and of the extent to which she personally had blood on her hands. Probably herself, her husband. She was probably just talking to people she knew directly in the Communist Party, because I'd assume most of these things are secret and not talked about so much. But these crimes against humanity, you might say, this form of state-sanctioned brutality, these things she's describing, I was able to say to her, seriously, you're seriously telling me that you think this was happening in Sweden while you were there. And I pushed her on this because she really knew Sweden. And she'd also visited the United States of America. She'd visited some countries in Western Europe. And, part of the fragility and brittleness of her answer, and many left-wing people are like this, not all, I don't know, but a significant percentage of left-wing people are like this. She invoked the sort of mythic memory of Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and this sort of thing, and no. She had to believe that everywhere in the world was just as bad as Laos, this pathetic, hopeless communist dictatorship, where, the government had a certain level of brutality, a certain level of corruption, so on and so forth. And again, as she just kind of clarified or reiterated that, this is what she needs to believe. She needs to believe that she's part of a government that, although perhaps no better than any other government, is also no worse, right? She has to morally absolve herself in this way. I was able to challenge her just by pointing to the dynamics of population flow in Southeast Asia at that time. I said, even though Laos is a poor country, every year, thousands of people escape from Myanmar to Laos. Why is that? What do you think the difference is between the government in Myanmar and the government in Laos? Now, by the way, that's not perpetual. There have been periods of time when people were escaping from Laos into Myanmar. There have been periods of time when people were escaping from communist China into Myanmar, right? But lately, we've had a long period of time in which people were escaping from Myanmar into any of the adjacent countries they could escape into. Escaping into Laos, China, of course, Thailand, so on and so forth. People are trying to get out of Myanmar. Why do you think this? You think life is the same everywhere? Like even just that contrast. And of course, the necessary next step was to say, what do you think there are more of every year? People who escape from the government in Myanmar to come here and live in Laos, or people who escape from Laos to live in Thailand? And if you guys don't know, it's way beyond, brain drain. A huge percentage of the population of Laos, or a huge percentage of people born in Laos at any one time are living in Thailand, legally or illegally, temporarily or permanently. Now, Thailand is also not paradise. And then again, you come back to this juxtaposition. Okay. You really think democracy in Sweden works the same way that it does here in Laos? When you're in Thailand and you read the newspapers, what do you see? Now, the world has changed. At that time, there was, at that time, political conditions in Thailand were different than they are today. But, I could say, look, when you look at a newspaper in Thailand, right, you see people criticizing the government, for example, complaining about police brutality, police corruption, just to give a more concrete example than just complaining about government, right? When you go to Sweden and you read the newspaper, what do you see? And now here in Laos, when you read the newspaper, what do you see? I used to work inside the department of the Laotian government. I was directly employed by the government of Laos in the same department that produced all of the foreign language newspapers. They had an English newspaper, a French newspaper, forget. Yeah, I remember suggesting they should start a Japanese newspaper. I think it was just English and French at that time. We handled a few other things too. I remember at one point it was taken very seriously. I was given some papers from the Russian embassy. That was very serious. But yeah, so it was this kind of foreign communications department, but it included the printing of newspapers in English and French. It's not the same everywhere. And this kind of brutality, one of the reasons why it's less common in Thailand, believe me, it happens in Thailand, but it's a lot less common in Thailand than it is in Laos. It's a lot less common in Thailand than it is in Myanmar, is precisely that the newspapers can complain about it. Now, I don't know, within the last 10 years, Has something like this happened even once in Sweden? Nobody's perfect. But for something like this to happen once or twice in Sweden, among other things, the newspapers would have made a huge event out of it. Uh, Look, Rogam Silva, um, I'm just going to ask you. I mean, I don't know, only 15 people in the audience here. We're talking about me today. Okay, so we're talking about. We're talking about me. We're talking about what I'm doing with my immediate future and my long-term future. If you want to talk about anything else, go to some other YouTube channel. It's heartbreaking to see the stupidity of my audience. After so many years, after more than 8 years spent building up this audience and my connection and rapport with this audience, their understanding of me and my understanding of them, it's heartbreaking, not because of the cruelty of the audience, but because the people in the audience, even when they want to help, fundamentally are too stupid to help. Now, I open by mentioning this peculiar attitude of this Laotian communist apparatchik for a reason. The number one most commonly expressed sentiment from my audience, and certainly the most commonly expressed sentiment from well-intentioned people, as opposed to people who are trying to troll me or insult me or take me down. Number one most common sentiment is, it's the same everywhere. I think you really have to examine what your motivations are for why you would say that, why you would want to believe that. When, just as in comparing Laos to Myanmar, Laos to Thailand, Thailand to Sweden, of course you know that's not true, right? Of course you know that's not true. Of course it's not the same everywhere. And whatever country you are from, member of my audience, you know that's not even true comparing one city to another within Germany. Bremen is not Berlin. I mean, what are you going to say? Northern Italy is not Southern Italy. You must really be aware of the differences, sometimes even between different neighborhoods in the city you're living in. Of course, that's not true. Why, in this context, when we're talking about, the immediate future of this one person, you have some kind of connection to. You have some kind of connection to me. I'll digress on that in just a moment. Why would you say that? In the case of the government official from Laos, there's a very clear reason for why she's saying that, right? We all know what she's trying to justify, what it is she's trying to make excuses for. What about you? What are you making excuses for when you say to me, there's no difference between living in one place and another? Now, even just within the examples mentioned in the last video, it's just ridiculous, Now, the number two most common sentiment, I think, again, reflects a very deep, dark, self-serving form of stupidity that some of you should probably reflect on. You should reflect on, no offense, what the fuck is wrong with you that you would say this to me? All right, I said I should digress in this for a moment. What is your connection to me? There are people who discovered this channel quite recently, but they've listened to me talk for like 5 hours. There are probably a lot of people in your life you haven't listened to for 5 hours. You might have discovered this channel 1 month ago, and you've listened to me talk for 5 hours. That's already a significant connection. For others, it's 50 hours or 500 hours. Some of you have read my books. Some of you know my work and my life story for many years. But regardless, my point is to say, I would not underrate the significance of getting to know someone by listening to them talk for 5 hours. I think that's already significant, And many of the people I tell anecdotes about. So let's say, for example, some of my university professors who took me out to lunch, took me out to dinner, like they didn't just talk to me in the classroom or standing around outside the classroom. There were university professors who went out to eat meals with me in a restaurant. If you add up how many hours of conversation we had, right? 5 hours is significant. Like, some of them, it was more than 5 hours, and it was much more. But even if you just think about the professors with whom, if you think, okay, how many hours did we talk for in total outside of the classroom? Sit and have coffee, sit and have a meal, and really talk. 5 hours is significant. Um, some of my videos are personal, some of them are political. But regardless, I just say you in the audience shouldn't kind of sell yourself short on the extent to which you know me. And the people who've met me in real life outside of my YouTube videos, one of the most common things they say is they normally say, "Oh my God," or "Holy shit." They're surprised one way or the other, and they say, "I can't believe it. You're exactly the same in person as you are in your YouTube videos." I recently talked to a YouTuber, and yeah, I was shocked when it was the other way. That it really, as soon as you got to know this person off camera, it was a woman. She was a totally different person off camera than on camera. In some ways, she was presenting herself on camera as the diametric opposite of who she really was off camera. And I mean, I can kind of sort of relate to that, but no. The person you've gotten to know on camera is very much the real me. Okay, returning to the earlier thread I started, I mentioned the number one kind of malign misconception in my audience in response to my earlier video. And number two follows this pattern. This pattern is common enough that we should have just one word for it in English. Maybe we have people in the audience today who speak many different languages. Maybe in your language, there's just one word for this. Okay, here's the pattern. I say to you, I have to go to work on Monday. But I don't know if I can go because I have no shoes. I relied on this one pair of shoes for work, and the sole fell off the shoe. And it's really hard for me to get a pair of shoes as a vegan that I'm allowed to wear it at my job, whatever the job is. They don't allow me to just wear running shoes or something. And I think I'm going to have to call in sick because I don't have any shoes. It's not going to be, today is Saturday, for me to get a new pair of shoes by Monday. I don't have the shoes I require for this situation. Have you ever said some of this to someone? Like, hey, I don't have the shoes I need. And they respond by saying, oh, well, there's no satisfying you. You'll never be happy. So, you know what? I know how you are. I know how you people are. It doesn't matter if you have 5 shoes or 10 shoes or 500 pairs of shoes. You're never going to be satisfied. So why can't you just learn to settle down and put up with what you've already got? Now, this kind of observation, this kind of reaction, I'll give you some more examples. I mean, I've dealt with this again and again in so many different walks of life, frankly. There was a woman I met once. I spoke with her only briefly, but I could tell she was way above average intelligence. She was quite intelligent and had a really good sense of humor. She was good looking, but it wasn't really her appearance. And I was interested. This is way back when I was single, a million years ago. And I asked this friend of mine who'd known her for a few years, actually, what I asked him was, look, I know you're just friends with her now, but didn't you ever try to have a relationship with her? Like, didn't you try to be boyfriend and girlfriend with her, just given these redeeming qualities she has? And I remember what he said to me was, you're right. She's smart. She's interesting. She's funny. She's good looking. But if you go over to her apartment, she's got a bedroom, she's got a bathroom, she's got a kitchen, and then she's got a whole other room where you open the doors and it's like a giant walk-in closet with just hundreds of pairs of shoes on the wall. That's it. It's the shoe room. She's one of those women who's constantly acquiring new pairs of shoes and has this huge selection of shoes. And she thinks about which shoes she's going to put on every day. I was like, wow. Okay, it exists. Like, I get it. Whether it's one person in 1,000 or one person in 1,000,000, there are some people where if they complain to you that they need to have a pair of shoes and they ain't got no shoes, what it really means is they have a walk-in closet with 500 pairs of shoes, but they can't be satisfied, and they won't even be satisfied until they reach they won't ever be satisfied. When they go from 500 pairs of shoes to 1,000 pairs of shoes, they still won't be satisfied. I get it. This exists. But whether you're talking to someone who's just met you, like they've only known you for a few minutes, like it's a brief, shallow conversation, or as in this case, like me talking to this audience, like you're talking to people who've known you for like 5 years. Most of you guys have known me for 5 years. Really think about it. When did you first watch a video on my channel? And again, some of you, even if you've only known me for a few weeks or a few months, think about how many hours we've spoken. Think about it. When I say to you, look, I'm in a real crisis here. I can't stay here anymore. I can't live here anymore. And I need to move somewhere that meets my minimum requirements. Why? Why would you leap to the conclusion that there's something wrong with me, like the sneakerhead, as Spen has said to the audience, that I'm like an obsessive shoe collector who can't be satisfied? Absolutely nothing in that video and nothing in any of my prior videos would make you think I have absurdly high standards or expectations. Nothing would, I mean, sorry, we can get back into what exactly I said in that video, what the criteria were. I said it because they're very, very simple. Intentionally, that video has a focus on just one criterion for where I should live and why. And it tells you, look, I'm in a desperate situation right now. Something has to change. My life is terrible. I'm saying this to you out of desperation and anguish. I'm asking for help. So I mean, if someone says that to you, even if it's just about their shoes, and by the way, guys, I have been in that situation. I have very large feet. I don't think they look disproportionate to the rest of my body. I'm 6'3". A lot of my life I wore size 14. This is American size 14. Back when I wore boots, I wore 13.5 EEE. The E is for extra wide. But depending on the shoe company, it could be 13, could be 13.5, could be 14. I said they used to do 13.5 extra wide was what I used to do. But I got big feet. You think it's easy for me to get vegan shoes when I live in China? I used to live in various parts of Asia, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia. And it has gotten easier with time. It has. But many years ago, oh God, I don't even want to get, I remember living in Hong Kong. It was very, very hard to get shoes. My point is someone can respond to that as if, oh, you're just someone who will never be satisfied, or you're just someone with such high expectations. Like, oh, you expect to have the fanciest designer shoes imaginable. And it's like, no, dude, I'm really fucked up here. Like, this is really a problem. There was a period of time in my life in both Hong Kong and Taiwan where I wore plastic Birkenstock clogs to business meetings. And I was regarded as outrageously eccentric, and perhaps I am. But it was like, dude, I can't buy like leather dress shoes. I can't wear the same kinds of shoes other people wear to these business meetings. And anyway, I mean, I won't get into the details of that in Hong Kong. My point is, you have to be willing to take someone seriously when they tell you in all due humility and with overt desperation and anguish, I need help. And so we've just covered two criteria, or sorry, we shouldn't even say criteria, but two thought terminating cliches whereby you people in my audience have shut down, dismissed, and denigrated that cry for help. One, oh, everywhere you go, it's the same anyway, so your complaint is unreasonable. Like, oh, yeah, New York versus Victoria. Who can tell the difference? Who can tell the difference between living on Manhattan Island and living in downtown Victoria? I can't tell the difference. Are you fucking kidding me? Let alone the difference between Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Hong Kong, Japan. I mean, are you fucking kidding me? Sweden, Denmark, like, oh yeah, who Who can? It's the same everywhere. Like, does this need to be refuted? Like, again, I'm not going to spend the time to refute this. It's just ridiculous. And we'll come back to what was my one criterion. You need to accept what the fuck is wrong with you that you said this to me. And guys, I deleted a lot of comments. There were the public comments on the YouTube video. There were the private comments that were sent to me by email within Patreon messaging. So a couple of those I'm going to read in a minute. But yeah, there are also comments I deleted. And the comments that hurt me, some of them were meant to be hurtful, but some of them weren't. Some of them were people who are trying to be helpful. But in this way, what you're saying, it's really denigrating. It's really stupid, So Spen says, everywhere's the same when you're looking at a laptop. It's not true, Spen. Hey, what is this? Oh. That's a reminder to recycle plastic bottles. Sorry, I just looked messy being on camera. I didn't realize it was there. Spen, there was a hit song about competitive chess. It was from a musical just called Chess. And one of the few lyrics, it's a very repetitious song, so there aren't that many lyrics, but one of the few lyrics was, one city is very much like another when you've got your head down over your pieces, brother. So pieces being chess pieces. But Spen, it's not true. So, do you think my life would be the same if right now I moved to Kiev? Which, guys, I can do. My next live stream, I don't even think it's that expensive. I can go to Ukraine. And even if I'm paying no direct attention to politics and the war in Ukraine, imagine how different my next live stream will be. I could just go to Ukraine and do comedy videos. I go to Ukraine and just do videos talking about anti-Semitism. In Ukraine, it's a big issue. Okay, I could go to the Polish border area with Ukraine also, to give another example. No, everything's going to be different. Everything. So I just say, oh, geez, man. Oh. Anyway, yeah. I realize this is not so. A lot of these comments, it's not so much that they have bad intentions, but still, I mean, it hurts me after putting 8 years into YouTube. This is the point where okay, so good. This is a good point to non sequitur mention that. The last time I did this, this is a contrast. The last time I really turned to the audience for help was when I was applying for jobs in Japan and I wasn't finding any. So this was before I moved to Kunming, before I moved to Dehong, before that period of my life living in China. I was in a different apartment in Victoria, Canada. And this all comes back to the fact that my parents are insane. That continued disrupting and destroying my life in my 30s and my 40s. In case you think it only screws up your life when you're a child and a teenager, by the way. But, I had about a semester and a half left to finish my bachelor's degree at UVic. Really, what I should have done was to switch into a completely different major and get myself on a different long-term career path. But I was at University of Victoria working on Chinese and Japanese. I had to switch from Chinese to Japanese. And I just need a certain number of credits to finish that BA. And now I could have gone on to a master's degree and PhD, but whatever. And all of a sudden, my father just decides that he's poor, that he's out of money, and I have to suddenly get a job, throw all my possessions in the apartment, leave Victoria, go elsewhere and get a job. So that's why I was applying for jobs in Japan all of a sudden. Now, that is not the first time that happened in my life. I'd have to think whether or not that was the last time that happened in my life. There are many ways in which this is surreal and just reflects the fact that my father was insane. As I recall, so just keep in mind, I'm a local Canadian citizen. I was getting the cheapest education available to me, unlike many of my brothers and sisters. My father spent a huge amount of money supporting my sister's education. She's a professor today with a PhD. Still an imbecile. You can get a PhD, but I mean, she's really a shithead. There was no intellectual potential to foster there, but my parents, again, even back when I was a teenager, They paid huge amounts of money to support my sister's education while not supporting my education. And on the contrary, at several crucial junctures, undermining and sabotaging my education so that I couldn't complete my degree, so I couldn't move farther. That really is a huge part of the story of my life. So many years ago, before the big conflict in Chiang Mai, because that happened when I was on my way to take a job in Kunming, long story. At that juncture, my father suddenly told me, like as if the family was suddenly bankrupt and they couldn't afford like $5,000 tuition. Some of you in Europe are thinking, oh, $5,000, that's a lot of money for tuition. In Canada and the United States, $5,000 a year is very, very little in terms of tuition. It's in the United States, people pay $100,000 for tuition or $50,000 for tuition. But really, this is very, very cheap, very reasonable. When I was living like a church mouse, I was living in very, very humble conditions to make this possible. Anyway, all of a sudden, my insane father decides that I have to drop out of university and get a job, not for the first time. So all the hard work I've been doing on Chinese and Japanese comes to an abrupt stop. I start applying for jobs in Japan, including, by the way, I applied for the JET program, JET. Some of you know what that is, some don't. And I wasn't getting any. I wasn't even getting. I had a couple job interviews. So I was going to say I wasn't getting job interviews. I did have a couple job interviews, but I was applying for the lowest and the meanest forms of employment in Japan. It was a very bleak situation. I didn't really want to learn Japanese. I didn't really want to move to Japan. And I was under pressure for another reason. This is partly just people lying to me. But I had the impression from my lawyers that I was going to have shared custody of my daughter in no time. Like, oh, yeah, we do this paperwork, then this paperwork. Then you get the divorce and the joint custody, and this is all going to be wrapped up. So I was really in a position, one of the reasons to give Japan a chance was I had to live somewhere where the quality of life was good enough to have my daughter come and visit and stay with me. Like, as opposed to Cambodia, as opposed to Myanmar, as opposed to, I don't know, there are more dangerous places in the world you can live. Okay, if you are going to be a part-time parent, like, I don't know, every so many months, your daughter comes and stays with you for several months. Okay, Japan seemed like it seemed like a reasonable compromise to make at that time. Anyway, I was not finding any path forward in Japan. And at that time, I made a video, not so different from the one I made, the last video before this one, or not so different from this video today, saying to people, look, and at that time I had a lot of viewers. There's a brief period of a lot of optimism and interest in the channel before the conflict with Durian Rider. And that was that period of engagement and optimism, reflecting the overall vitality of the vegan movement at that time. And also just reflecting the challenging and new ideas I was bringing into the vegan movement. A lot of what I was saying at that time, nobody had heard before. Nobody thought of it before. Now they've heard it. And by the way, I'm happy that other people have taken up my ideas. My original ideas, many of them have become commonplace because other people recite them. Good. I didn't share these political ideas with the world so they would remain as a burnished gem in a set on a pillow in a display case or something. These ideas are for everyone to use and misuse, such as the political progress of the world. Anyway, I made a video at that time saying, look, this is this really dire situation I'm in, and I can't stay here, and I have to go somewhere, and I have to get a job, and what have you. And at that time, I got one email from one person in the audience trying to help. One. And it was a guy who was living on one of these hippie commune farms in the United States. And he said, oh, well, we have a lot of vegans here, and, they wouldn't pay you a salary, but I'm sure if you came here and hung out, people would find a way to help you out. You could get by, And, I wrote back to I said, look, I don't know who you think you're talking to, but I'm a divorced parent with a child. This is how many years of university education I have. These are my areas of expertise. These are the peer-reviewed articles I've written. Like, this is who I am intellectually. Like, what future do you think I'm going to have 5 years from now if I basically go on vacation and move into your hippie farming commune? And let me just point out, as a Canadian, you're inviting me to come to the United States of America illegally? You want me to live as an illegal migrant worker on a farm where I won't even be paid? Like, why don't you just think a few steps ahead? Where does that put me? So what? So I lose all my worldly possessions. I go there with nothing but a backpack to move in with these hippies on this farm. You know? Oh yeah? Where am I going to be 5 years from now? Now look, so as bleak as that is, it's worth talking about, worth thinking about. How much better or how much worse would it have been for me to go to Japan with nothing but a backpack? These are all really bad options, you know. Anyway, I wasn't angry at the guy. I wasn't. Um, uh, I was challenging him, and I don't think he wrote back again. I thought it was a conversation that could lead somewhere if he participated in it. But like, if you think you're helping someone in inviting them to be an unsalaried, unpaid slave on a farm, and not even like a professional, well-run farm, but a farm run by amateurs on an ideological fringe. Like, you're basically inviting me to join a cult, you know, and a cult where the other people won't even like me or appreciate me. Like, really think about what a terrible suggestion this is, short-term and long-term. And again, not just thinking for myself, but also thinking for my daughter. And okay, what if I work on this farm and I get injured? Like, have you even thought that far out? Like, okay, so I got injured by the combine harvester. What then? So I have no health care and I have no money. Like, it's just crazy. So that was, at that time, it was very memorable to me. That was the one and only response I got. Now, my situation has changed. My father is dead. I'm still, really damaged for life by the decisions he made, including that particular decision at that time to sabotage my education and career plans. There's really no way to ever recover from that. I needed help at that time. There was no way to move forward with Chinese at University of Victoria. There was no way to move forward with Japanese either. Probably I should have just started a degree in Latin. Probably should have switched to classics. One of the reasons I didn't do that, all right, I guess I won't get into it. But I remember I looked at the possibility of switching into Russian and switching into French. Greek and Latin did cross my mind, but again, I'm not going to get into why that seemed like a really bad idea at the time. But yeah, it included this issue of earning money. Fundamentally, okay, what kind of career are you going to have? How are you going to actually earn money, raise your daughter, spend time with your daughter, have a home your daughter can visit? That pressure was on me then. And as I say, I was dealing with lawyers who were partly incompetent and partly dishonest. And I was dealing with my parents who were completely insane and also incompetent and also dishonest, but the insanity mattered more. And my parents did intentionally lie to me about things too. Not to digress into that. So my situation today, it's much different and it's much simpler. And that's why it kind of stuns me how stupid all you people were in response to my last video. No offense, but there isn't a single exception. Every single one of you is too stupid to help me. Every single one. Did you fail to grasp the simplicity of that one criterion the video sets out for where I should live and what I should do next? I asked the question again and again, will this make me a better person just 5 years from now? It's one thing to say, oh, you could move to Japan. Right? It's one thing to say, oh, you could move to Denmark, Sweden. Got a suggestion for a particular country in Latin America. Hold on, I'll just get it out. Ecuador. Who am I going to be 5 years from now if I move to Ecuador? Like, what's good about that? And again, the simplicity of just dealing with this one criterion. So I'm not asking you, how can I earn a living? I'm not asking you, how can I be a parent to my own daughter? I'm not asking you, how can I engage with politics and change the world? I'm not asking you how I could be involved with veganism, which I've given up on. My final act of vegan activism was publishing that book, Future of an Illusion. We're done. But I'm not asking how can I be part of a vegan movement. I'm not asking you how I can be happy and enjoy my life or something more vague like that. I'm not asking you about education, career, parenting the daughter I already have, or hypothetically having another child. Nothing else was brought into this. There was just one criterion. And I very intentionally asked it both looking backward and looking forward, right? Is it the case that I would be a better person today if I had been living in Los Angeles for the last 5 years, if I had been living in Pittsburgh for the last 5 years, all right? If I were living in Los Angeles for the next 5 years, if I were living in Pittsburgh, and we can repeat this for numerous examples, there was an intentional focus on just this one criterion. And again, it's obvious in the video, right? Like this isn't a subtle or hidden aspect of the video. That is the argument of the video. It's a 20-minute video. There aren't 10 different arguments there. But then look at these, look at these replies I get. People, what do you think? Do you think I'm talking about having a beach vacation? Like, oh, it could be nice living in this place. Oh, it could be, oh, you should try Ecuador or something. Like, really, bro? That's the level your responses are at? And, again, what's most heartbreaking is to look at the comments that actually have good intentions. Where people are saying things with good intentions, but as I say, they're just too stupid to help. You're too stupid to grasp the gravity and significance of that one question. So let's come back to, again, these two big thought-terminating cliches. One, the idea that everywhere is the same. And then two, this issue of blaming me, of saying, oh, no. The problem isn't that you have a hole in your shoe, so you can't walk on concrete because there's a hole in this wall. No. The problem is you. The problem is that your standards, your expectations, you can just never be satisfied. Now, I've dealt with this in a lot of different authoritarian contexts. Like, I'm sitting and having a face-off with a university professor, whether it's a professor teaching Chinese, professor teaching Japanese, professor teaching Korean Ojibwe, and I'm saying, look, this language program is not good enough. One of the thought-terminating cliches, they use both. One of the things they say, I had a professor here say to me seriously, oh, it's the same everywhere. Chinese is taught the same everywhere. Oh yeah, really? And have you visited everywhere? Have you visited just 5 universities and observed the way Chinese is taught? It's not true at all. Of course, it's different in different institutions. So it's ridiculous. But that is one thought-terminating cliche that people in positions of power use to try to shut me down and try to blame me for the problem. Oh no, the problem is you. But then obviously the very next card they play is say, you can never be satisfied. No matter where you go, you're going to complain that it's not good enough for you. And every single time a professor did this, I simply turned to talking about what the criteria are, like what would be good enough. And in most cases, the professor was so uncomfortable they couldn't remain sitting down. Like they got up and walked out of the room, got up and started pacing, like physically got up and started wringing their hands. They didn't break down crying, but they were really upset just talking about these criteria. I'm not joking. I've been through this again and again and again. So, give you an example. One of the Chinese professors who played this game on me, trying to shut me down this way. I pointed out to her, I said, I have not spoken in Chinese once all year. So I've mentioned this many, many years ago on the channel when I was talking about how the Chinese language is taught. It's like this is an entire year where the role of spoken drill, that's old-fashioned English to say drill, but spoken language exercises, like where I say a sentence, you say a sentence back to me, and I say a sentence back in Chinese, that has not happened once. So like you say to me that I can't be satisfied. I haven't said to you that I require 5 hours of that a day. That's a lot. It's a lot of education to provide. You haven't asked me how much we're like. That's something lacking here. That's really palpable and specific. Now, that wasn't the only example. I was able to list off very palpably what was wrong with this language program. But just in raising oh no, here's a problem. Here's something you can actually solve. Here's something you can actually do. Like, well, your current method of teaching this language involves me sitting in silence and filling out a multiple choice test on paper, like, as opposed to speaking. Okay. There are really obvious problems here. The Korean Ojibwe program, one of the things I said to them was, well, yes, I would like to be in a program where they have one person who speaks the language fluently and where that person can say sentences back and forth with me. So again, it comes down to the same, I'm sorry, I'm not really comfortable studying a language where there isn't a single person in the classroom who's also studying the language, like even a student who's just able to practice sentences with me. Like, what do you want me to tell you guys? Where you talk through how the language is being taught and what they're doing and what they're not doing. Now, again, different challenges with Korean Ojibwe as language. The point is this: people in positions of authority are very quick to shut you down using these same two thought terminating cliches. Like, oh, you don't like it? You don't like the quality of education you're getting for so many $1,000s per year? Well, the problem is you. Because what you don't realize is, one, it's the same everywhere. So if you leave here and go to New York, if you leave here and go to Vancouver, it's the same shit. So fuck you. Who are you to complain? And then point two, you could never be satisfied anyway. You're the kind of person who, you complain that you don't have a single pair of shoes to wear to work. But the truth is, even if you had a closet with 500 pairs of shoes in it, you still wouldn't be satisfied. Even if you had the most expensive pair of shoes, you would want a more expensive pair of shoes from another designer. You're a shoe snob. You always want something better. Now, the problem is this. In the authoritarian context, it makes sense, right? I understand why those professors were doing that to me, right? Like, it's evil, it's bad and evil and wrong, but it makes sense. I think you could imagine if you had the warden of a prison, you have the CEO of a prison, there's a man, an executive in charge of a prison. That's probably how they're going to deal with complaints from the prisoners. To give another example, let's say it's not the prisoner, it's a men's prison. The prisoner's wife comes to complain. You have a man in prison and his wife comes and says, look, the last time I was here, my husband, he had bruises all over his face. He's been beaten up. I asked him about it. He told me this is what happened. My husband, he's been getting thinner and thinner. I think the food isn't good enough. Like, he's gaunt and his face is swollen. He says he can't get medical care. A typical authoritarian reaction from the executive or warden of a prison is to say, one, if you don't like it, guess what? It's the same everywhere. If you want to request to have your husband sent to a different prison, he can go to a prison in New York. It's just as bad. And, he might even say, hey, we're better than most. You can look around. There's some other prisons that are even worse than this. Same everywhere. Same problems everywhere. And then two, oh, I know your type. Oh, you won't be satisfied with anything. You'll say it's a crime against humanity. You'll say we're violating human rights. You'll say it's too brutal or too dirty. Even if this prison looked like a 5-star hotel like the Hilton, you still wouldn't be satisfied. There's no satisfying you people. There's no satisfying you. All right? Well, again, it's evil, right? But when an authority figure does this, it makes sense. What I have to say to you in the audience, what I have to ask you to do is really question and really examine what you did in response to my last YouTube video. Because when you do this to me, it does not make sense. And guys, I'm on a real precipice right now. I really thought through today deleting the entire YouTube channel. I would have set everything to unlisted rather than absolute delete. But I'm really looking at more than one fork in the road right now. And, the tragedy of the French legal system is that I never get to see my daughter again. And guys, the other tragedy, this is related, my parents pretended they were poor when I needed just a little bit of money to finish my university education again and again. It happened repeatedly. I'm not going to get into the full list of the different junctures at which my parents sabotaged my education and career, but it's crucial to understanding my life. It's crucial to understanding why I didn't have the opportunities my own brothers and sisters had, brothers and sisters whose education was paid for out of the same wallet, out of the same bank account. Yeah, a reminder, my father had 9 kids. So to be fair, that's also why when he claimed he had no money, I'd believe him. He had so many fucking kids, and a lot of them were going to university at the same time. It's like, okay, I believe you don't have the money to support my education. Like it was believable, but I know now it's not true. Anyway, on the one hand, I am liberated from any hope or any expectation that I'm really going to take care of my daughter. I don't know if I'll see her again at all ever, but if I do, it's going to be for like one weekend a year. And I'm still employing a team of lawyers to that end, by the way. That's the paperwork is still going. But if I see my daughter, it's not really going to be in the capacity of a parent at all. And that's what I've learned over years. And my current lawyer is very honest to me. It's a real contrast to the other lawyers I dealt with. She's utterly cynical, utterly nihilistic, brutally honest lawyer. She doesn't give me any false hopes or expectations. Okay, so that's a huge difference from any point in the past, right? The divorce thing is over. The custody battle is over. Any expectations or any pressure like that, is over. And then the other thing that's changed is the money situation, right? It's unbelievable, but my current situation is if I live within modest means, let's say if I can live on $2,000 a month, I don't have to worry about money. Now, just by the way, guys, $2,000 a month, it's not that much. I cannot casually fly to Tokyo. I cannot casually fly to South America or anywhere else. But yeah, I have a kind of sinecure's position here where if I keep my living expenses low, I don't have to work any job. I don't have to do anything other than what you see me doing right now on YouTube, which raises these questions. Should I write a book? Should I go to film school? Should I become a documentary filmmaker? Should I go into stand-up comedy? What should I do as a creative intellectual at this juncture moving ahead? And again, so this comes back to the major topic of this video and the video before it. And then where should I do it? And who should I do it with? Right? Guys, I can't do it alone. And I'm saying to you loud and clear, I can't live this way anymore. Now, my life in Taiwan was indescribably horrible before I moved here to Victoria. And there are different reasons why I never described that period of my life to you. Like, you guys really don't know how bad it was. You really don't. And, the one word explanation for why you didn't hear about how dire and desperate and terrible my life was in Taiwan is Melissa, right? What she was and was not comfortable with me saying on the internet for many years was a factor in terms of what she was. My life in Taiwan, it was indescribably terrible. It was indescribably disappointing. Now, I don't have to get into what, but in terms of language study, in terms of career, in terms of education, but in terms of the vegan movement, most of all, in terms of finding other people I can collaborate on YouTube videos with, in terms of what I wanted to do in politics and book reviews. There were all these different aspirations I had. But I was interested in doing comedy even back then, too. As bad as my life was in Taiwan, and look, guys, I might as well say it. There was a big chunk of time when I was in Taiwan when I was openly suicidal. There was a chunk of time in Taiwan when I had a broken foot and I couldn't walk normally. It's never been mentioned on this YouTube channel before in terms of like how I wasn't admitting to you guys how bad my life was. It was painful for me to walk, just say to do grocery shopping. I had a broken foot. It worked out to be almost exactly 1 year that I was injured with this broken foot. It took 12 months to recover from. And also I got bedridden ill with coronavirus when I was there. I was very, very sick for a period of time. And I didn't even know it was coronavirus. It's kind of a longer story to tell, but afterward it was, oh, wow, okay. That was, the first wave. And I was really, really sick. So and just to be honest, even in the period of time before I was suicidal, it was a terrible struggle. My life in Taiwan was unbelievably awful. Okay. I would have never returned to Victoria. I would have never returned to and started living in this apartment if it weren't for coronavirus. All right. One way or another, if coronavirus had not forced me to come back here to Canada, I would have moved ahead in Taiwan or in Asia generally. I mean, maybe I would have left Taiwan for Japan, for South Korea, for communist China, for Singapore, something, Hong Kong. I don't know. Maybe I would have moved around. I absolutely would not have returned to Canada if there were not a legal mandate forcing me to do so because of an unprecedented global health crisis, global pandemic. That's the only reason why I returned to Canada. And I would just point out to you, a lot of you guys know this, but a lot of you don't. My situation in relation to Canada, it's so negative. I had a choice, and the choice was presented to me more than once for whether or not my daughter should become a Canadian citizen. And every time I said no, I was seriously committed to that before my daughter was born. And I was seriously committed to that at other crossroads when that came up. I remember my ex-wife raising it. And I was like, look, do you think that's like a trivial decision for me? Like, it's not an accident that my daughter does not have Canadian citizenship. I wanted her to have French citizenship rather than Canadian because my relationship to this country, this culture, this political context is so negative. All right. So look, my life in Taiwan, it was indescribably awful. And again, most of this hasn't been covered on the channel, but one little piece that was, I did make some videos talking about the problem with internal language fragmentation in Taiwan, which is just like the vast majority of the time in Taiwan, when you were speaking to people, like I was trying to speak textbook Chinese, and they are not remotely speaking textbook Chinese. And like their ability to communicate with you on even the simplest level, and everyone's in denial about it. There was like a woman who was the neighbor downstairs who was yelling at me as I came up the stairs. It's a culture that's very comfortable with yelling, by the way. And I stop and I look her in the eye, and I say to her, and she can understand me, but I can't understand her. I say to her, look, I'm a foreigner. I speak like Beijing Hua, like I speak textbook standard Chinese. You can't just yell at me in your dialect from your hometown and assume I'm going to understand. I said, no, look, if you speak slowly, maybe I can understand you. So I forced her to slow down and go through her. I said, okay, so like in the sentence you just said, I understood 6 words and there are 2 words I don't know. And I get out my phone dictionary and I put it in. I said, okay, say it again. I put it in. And she is using a dialect word that doesn't even count as Chinese for a landlord, And, and then I say to her, like the standard Chinese, oh, you mean this? Like, the standard Chinese word for landlord. But the language aspect and the fact that like they do not want to perceive Hakka as a separate language. They don't want to perceive Hokkien as a separate language. They want to pretend this is all one language, and they can all, to some extent, cope with the differences between these languages because they grow up with it. Like, and, again, she can understand me, but I can't understand her. She's used to watching movies that are in the standard Beijing dialect. Not every movie, but she's grown up watching some movies that are in that standard textbook dialect. She has some experience listening to the language the way I speak it. But I have no experience listening to the separate language. It's not even really a dialect that she's speaking. So like the isolation and the hostility you live with there. Okay, I moved to Taiwan because this is one of the countries with the highest percentage of vegans in the world. I moved there with all these different specific aspirations, but including to learn and study the language. And I was totally, utterly disappointed under every heading, including, I'm going to all these different universities and trying to enroll in classes, trying to move forward with my career education in that sense, formally as well as informally. I was going and applying for jobs. At that time, I needed to earn money. And by the way, literally, my YouTube channel paid my rent when I was in Taiwan. This YouTube channel was important to my survival because my rent was very, very low there, but it was important to my survival in that period in Taiwan. I was out applying for jobs, and the jobs are terrible and the rate of pay is too low, and it's just abominable. It's a terrible situation in so many ways. My point is, as hostile and disappointing and demoralizing a place as Taiwan was to live, I would not have left if I was not forced to. I moved back here to Canada against my will. All right. I'm just asking you to take seriously the title of my earlier video. I'm coming to you from a place of real desperation and real anguish, and I need help. And I wouldn't be asking you if I had anyone else or anyone better I could ask for help. When people in positions of authority respond to this kind of plea by denigrating you, insulting you, shutting you down, saying it's the same everywhere, no matter where you go, and saying, oh, well, like your requirements, your expectations are just so sky high, you wouldn't be satisfied anywhere. You would, that person is justifying and defending their own position of privilege, their own position of power. They're really vindicating their own laziness, and they're denigrating and dismissing you for a reason. They benefit by silencing you, by snuffing out your complaint, in the same way that the prison warden, that the executive running a prison benefits by silencing complaints, whether they come from the prisoners or the wives, husbands, children of the prisoners who may come in to complain, seeking better conditions. It certainly is convenient to pretend that it would be impossible to satisfy the requests for better prison conditions, that any specific complaint can be dismissed as if the requirements are so utopian, are so unattainable, that there's no point in making the smallest effort to make something better whatsoever. Guys, I've had fan mail today from people telling me how much better I made their lives. I mean, I could read you some of this shit. I just got email from a guy who was 23. He told me what a profound guy who'd never written to me before. Some of you have written to me many times over many years. I have gotten email from people explaining at length and in depth how I have made their lives better. Okay. Well, right now is your fucking opportunity to make my life better. And I'm going to be real with you. I don't fucking know what's going to happen if somebody doesn't step up and do something to help me, because I have already done everything I could do to help myself. Again, I'm bringing it down to just one criterion. Who am I going to be 5 years from now? I'm not asking you to worry about me getting a PhD. In the past, that was an issue. I'm not asking you to worry about me earning money. In the past, that was an issue. I'm not asking you to worry about me spending quality time with my daughter or anything else. Just one fucking question. Who am I supposed to be 5 years from now? And if you just examine, guys, I would have left here a long time ago if it weren't for coronavirus. Think about the bizarre struggle I've been trapped in this apartment in Canada for the last 2.5 years. What did you think? You think this is going to go on for another 2.5 years, for another 5 years? Who am I going to be if I let the bizarre compromise that coronavirus created become a permanent lifestyle choice, permanent vacation, permanent retirement for me? It makes no sense. And again, I'm sorry, but some of these suggestions you guys have sent in, they may be well-intentioned. They may be, but you're not answering. You're not speaking to that one criterion, the one question I'm asking you. Ecuador, why? Why would I spend the next 5 years of my life in Ecuador? How does that benefit me in this sense? Not making money, right? Not career. Who is the better person I'm going to be living 5 years in Ecuador? Who is the person I'm going to be living for 5 years in Sweden, in Denmark? And the main example I used in the video was Japan. Look, guys, if this is just about making a couple YouTube videos to give you a laugh, yeah, we can talk. I could go spend 6 weeks in Japan. I'm asking you to really take this seriously. How many more rolls of the dice do you think I've got here? And when I get out of the airplane in Sweden, let's just take Sweden. Like, before you say this shit to me, did you even fucking think it through? Legally, do you think I have the right to work in Sweden? Legally, do you think I have the right to live in Sweden? Do you think I have the right to rent an apartment, to buy a house? Like, do you think I have the right to have health care, to go to a doctor in Sweden? What the fuck are you thinking? Like, do you think this is a game where you just throw a dart at the map? Like, is it too much for me to fucking ask you to think through 2 paragraphs before you send me this fucking email? Yeah, what's my legal status in Ecuador? What's the plan there? What's the strat? You know, and look, it's not impossible. It's not impossible that someone's going to come with a fucking plan that's worth something. I literally bought a book on the visa situation for Spain. In the past, I did all the research for Greece. A lot of you guys know that because I made YouTube videos about the time. Okay, is it possible to become a citizen of Greece, to get a residency permit by doing this and by doing that? I have looked into those details for many countries. God knows I've done it for Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, for countries in Asia too. But I've done it for countries in Europe. Like, you know, it's strange because I'm not asking you for money. The only thing I'm fucking asking for from you is that you care. And not one fucking person in the audience could even care. And look, guys, if you just scroll back on my fucking channel, you can just put the word suicide into the search bar on my channel. And there were some really long, passionate, heartfelt videos where someone wrote into me saying they were contemplating suicide. And I give them specific advice for the specific situation. I talk it through with them philosophically and personally. Do you know how many situations I've been in like that, both on camera and off camera, in the last 8 years? Do you know how many people I've reached out to help? I mean, my point is, you don't know. You can't know. But by looking at the examples on this channel or just remembering, okay, you have some sense of the extent to which I have cared, not just about a political movement as an abstract totality, not just about democracy as a theme or a topic, or racism as a theme. There's so many different kind of political themes I've been passionate about on this channel, not just about Chinese as language, but the extent to which I have cared about you people as individuals in my audience. All right. And some of you I stayed in dialogue with for years and held your hand as you went through your fucking problems. All right. Seriously, whether it's 5 years or 8 years, there are people where I stayed in their life and caught up and kept up with them. And, they didn't just ask me for help once and then I gave them the answer and slammed the door. And in some cases, it worked out the way. People asked me for help and then they never talked to me again. And I tried to help them and whatever. There's a whole variety. Okay. Well, guys, again, I'm not asking you for money, right? I'm just asking you to fucking care. And I think for some of you, you've got some reflecting to do. Some of you wrote into me after that last video, and some of you who remained silent after the last video, because over 1,000 people saw the video. Is it that you're just too stupid to help? Is it that you have this authoritarian attitude in a context that doesn't make sense, like a university professor or like a prison warden, right? Or is it that you are so autistic that when someone comes to you in a situation of real desperation and anguish like this, that you just can't fucking care?